Sparta, many children's, many blessings, starting from the Gladiator. Chapter 11. The aftereffects of the groin kick were bigger than Lynx imagined. Not for himself, but for Crixus. Early the next morning, various versions of rumors spread in the training ground. Have you heard? Crixus pissed blood last night. Not just pissing blood. The instructor secretly called a doctor and said it might be ruined. Really? Just from that one kick? That kid is ruthless, he specifically targets below the belt. Better stay away from him in the future. Too sinister. Lynx listened to these discussions with an unchanged expression while practicing short sword in a corner of the training ground. Ruined? Not to that extent. He had held back some force at the time. That kick, although painful, would at most make Crixus suffer for a few days. It wouldn't really ruin him. But it was good that such rumors spread. At least he could have some peace for a while. Lynx. The instructor's voice came, with a bit of impatience. Lynx stopped his movements and turned to look. The instructor was a retired old gladiator with a knife scar on his face. His left leg was a bit lame, but his eyes were very fierce. He held a rattan whip in his hand and pointed to the sand pit on the other side of the training ground. Stop just practicing sword. Come over and practice wrestling. Close combat in the performance match is inevitable. With your thin arms and legs, you're finished if someone grabs you. Lynx put away the short sword and walked over. Two gladiators were already practicing wrestling in the sand pit, both big guys. When they saw Lynx come over, the two looked at each other, their eyes a bit subtle. You, practice with him. The instructor pointed to the stronger one. 10 minutes. No dirty tricks, just practice throws and escapes. The gladiator pointed to was Marcus, who had been close with Crixus before. He grinned, showing a mouth of yellow teeth. Lynx, don't worry, I will properly teach you. Lynx didn't speak. He took off his upper garment and walked into the sand pit. The two assumed their stances. Marcus let out a low roar and pounced fiercely. His hands directly grabbed toward Lynx's shoulders, the standard gladiator wrestling starting move, using weight and strength to suppress. Lynx didn't meet it head on. He sidestepped, and at the same time tripped Marcus's calf from behind with his right foot. Marcus missed and staggered forward one step, but immediately turned and pounced again. This time he learned. He opened his arms, wanting to hug Lynx's waist. Lynx still didn't let him hug him. He retreated half a step, blocked Marcus's arms with both hands, and used his forward momentum to pull him to the side. Thud. Marcus lost balance and fell face first into the sand pit, eating a mouthful of sand. Pa! Pa! He crawled up awkwardly, his eyes red. What the fuck are you dodging for? Is wrestling done like this? The instructor stood aside with his arms crossed, saying nothing. Lynx spread his hands. You said no dirty tricks, but you didn't say I couldn't dodge. I'll teach you how to wrestle today. Marcus was completely angry. On the third time he pounced, he used full force. His speed was much faster than the previous two times. Lynx's eyes narrowed. This time he didn't dodge. He rushed toward the charging Marcus. At the moment they were about to collide, his body suddenly dropped low. His shoulder pressed against Marcus's abdomen, his hands hugged his waist, and using the forward momentum, he executed a standard shoulder throw. Bang! Dust rose in the sand pit. Marcus was slammed solidly to the ground. His back hit hard, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. The whole place was quiet. Even the instructor raised an eyebrow. This throw was very professional. It wasn't the brute force throwing method of gladiators, but a technical one. Lynx let go, retreated 2 steps, and looked at the instructor. Is this okay? The instructor stared at him for a few seconds and nodded. Not bad. But in a real arena, the opponent won't give you so many chances. Marcus, get up. Continue. Marcus struggled to get up. His eyes toward Lynx had a few more traces of wariness, but more of unwillingness. For the next 10 minutes, the two practiced a few more times. Marcus tried to regain face every time. But Lynx's wrestling skills were clearly a level higher than his. He was thrown around until he was dizzy every time. In the end, Marcus was panting from exhaustion, with several bruises on his body. Lynx wasn't much better. Although he wasn't thrown, the high-intensity confrontation consumed a lot of energy, and the bruises on his arm from yesterday's performance match hadn't fully healed yet. They were starting to ache again. "All right, stop." The instructor finally spoke. "Lynx, what's wrong with your arm?" Lynx looked at his left forearm. It was purple with bruises and swollen. Hit by a wooden sword in yesterday's performance match. "Why didn't you say earlier?" The instructor frowned. "Go to the medical room and have a look. You can't be injured before the performance match. Master Batiatus will be unhappy." The medical room was behind the main building of the training ground, a separate small house. When Lynx pushed the door open, the room was filled with the smell of medicinal herbs. The room was not big. There were several wooden shelves against the wall, piled with bottles and jars. A woman wearing a simple linen long skirt was standing with her back to the door, pounding something in a stone mortar. Hearing the door open, she turned around. Myra. The female healer of the training ground, or rather, the female slave who knew medicine. She looked about 27 or 28 years old, with brown long hair simply tied back, no makeup on her face. But her features were delicate, especially her eyes, gentle but with a bit of fatigue. When she saw Lynx, she was stunned for a moment, then recognized him, the most popular newcomer in the training ground recently, the ruthless guy who killed an overseer with one punch and knocked down Crixus with one kick. "You are injured." Myra put down the mortar, wiped her hands, her voice very soft. "Arm, hit by a wooden sword." Lynx raised his left arm. Myra walked over and motioned for him to sit down. She first got a basin of clean water, dipped a clean cloth in it, and gently wiped away the dust and sweat on Lynx's arm. Her movements were very gentle and careful. Lynx could smell a faint herbal scent coming from her. "It's swollen badly." Myra carefully examined the injury. "The bone should be fine, but the bruise needs to be dispersed, otherwise it will affect movement." "Wait a moment." She turned and walked to the shelf, dug out a lump of green ointment from a clay jar, and took a roll of clean linen strips. The ointment applied to the arm felt cool and very comfortable. "This is a herbal ointment I made myself. It can reduce swelling and stop pain." Myra bandaged with the cloth strips while speaking softly. "Change the medicine once a day. It should reduce in 3 days. Don't use this hand too hard these days." "Thank you," Lynx said sincerely. Myra looked up at him, seeming a bit surprised. In her impression, gladiators were mostly rude and impolite. When they came to the medical room injured, they would curse. Very few would say thank you. "You're welcome." She lowered her head and continued bandaging. "This is what I should do." After bandaging, Myra packed up the things. She hesitated for a moment but still spoke. "That Crixus, he, really." She didn't finish, but the meaning was obvious. Lynx smiled. "Don't worry, he won't die, and he won't be ruined. He'll be in pain for a few days and it'll be fine." Myra breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. Although Mr. Crixus has a bad temper, but everyone is a poor person." This was said very carefully, but Lynx heard the sympathy in her words. "You think gladiators are pitiful?" Myra's hand paused, then continued packing. Her voice became even lower. "I just think, no one wants to be sold here, living day by day without knowing what tomorrow brings. Just being able to live is not easy. Lynx looked at her. This woman's eyes were very clean, without Lucretia's ambition and desire, and without the numbness or ferocity of the others in the training ground. She was like a medicinal herb growing in the cracks of stones, living hard but stubbornly, and still wanting to heal others. "What is your name?" Lynx asked. "Myra." "Myra." Lynx repeated. "Good name. I'm Lynx." Chapter 12. "I know," Myra said in a low voice. "The training ground is all talking about you." "Talking about what?" "That I'm ruthless and vicious. That I only hit below the belt." Myra's face reddened and she didn't answer. Lynx smiled. "It's fine. They're right. In this place, if you're not ruthless, you can't survive." Myra raised her head and looked at him for a while, then suddenly said, "But you are different from them." "How am I different?" "You said thank you. She paused. "And, the way you look at people is not as empty as them." Lynx's heart moved. This woman had quite sharp observation skills. "Maybe because I died once," he said half-jokingly. "A person who survived the whipping rack sees things more clearly." Myra nodded, seeming to accept this explanation. She turned around, took a small clay jar from the shelf, and handed it to Lynx. "Take this. Apply it on the bruises before sleeping every day. It will heal faster." Lynx took the clay jar. "How much?" "No need for money." Myra shook her head. "I picked the herbs myself. They're not worth anything." Lynx didn't refuse and accepted it. He took out a denarius from his bosom, the reward money Batiatus gave him yesterday, and placed it on the table. "The medicine can be free, but the goodwill must be accepted." Myra looked at the shiny silver coin and was stunned. 1 denarius was enough to buy a lot of things. "This is too much." "Not too much." Lynx stood up. "Your medicine is worth this price, and..." He paused. "I may need to trouble you again in the future." After saying that, he turned and left the medical room. Myra stood in front of the table, looking at the denarius, then at the closed door. Her eyes complex. In the following days, Lynx went to the medical room to change medicine every day after training. Myra didn't talk much, but her bandaging technique was very skilled. She would carefully check the recovery of the injury every time. Sometimes Lynx would chat with her a few words, ask about herbs, or listen to her talk about the injuries of other gladiators in the training ground. As they gradually became familiar, they talked more. "How did you learn medicine?" One day while changing the medicine, Lynx suddenly asked. Myra's hands didn't stop moving. She said softly, "My father used to be the herbalist in the village. I learned some from him when I was young. Later, the village was burned by the Romans. I was sold here. Master Batiatus saw that I knew some herbs, so he let me take care of the injured gladiators." She spoke very calmly, but Lynx heard the pain behind it. "I'm sorry." Myra shook her head. "It's all in the past. At least here, I can still save people." Lynx looked at her lowered side profile and suddenly remembered a story he had heard in his previous life. "In my eastern hometown, there is a legend," he began. "It is said that a pair of lovers who loved each other could not be together because of family opposition. In the end, they both died for love and turned into a pair of butterflies, together forever." Myra raised her head, her eyes flashing with curiosity. "Butterflies?" "Yes." Lynx continued. "The girl was called Zuyingtai. She was smart and brave. She disguised herself as a man to study and met the boy Liang Shanbo. The two studied together for 3 years and had good feelings, but Liang Shanbo never knew that Zuyingtai was a girl. He slowly told the story of Liang and Zhu, from classmates to separation, from proposing marriage to refusal, and finally to dying for love and turning into butterflies." Myra listened very seriously. Her hands even stopped moving. When she heard that Zhu Yingtai jumped into Liang Shanbo's tomb and the two turned into butterflies and flew away, her eyes turned slightly red. They, finally got together? She asked softly. Yes, they turned into butterflies and stayed together forever. Myra lowered her head and was silent for a while before continuing to bandage. It's really a beautiful story. Although the ending is sad, at least they finally got together. Lynx looked at her. Do you think they were stupid? To die for love? Myra thought for a moment and shook her head. Not stupid. If they can't be together while alive, being together after death is also a kind of happiness. After saying that, she realized what she had said. Her face reddened and she quickly lowered her head. The medicine is changed. Come again tomorrow. Lynx stood up and smiled. Thank you, Myra. Leaving the medical room, Lynx walked on the way back to his cell, thinking in his heart. Myra was a kind and innocent woman, and she had a good impression of him. But he couldn't rush. He had to take it slow. Just as he was thinking, he ran into Lucretia head-on. She was wearing a dark green long skirt today, her hair styled very delicately, and her makeup was gorgeous. Seeing Lynx coming from the direction of the medical room, she raised an eyebrow. Injured again? Lucretia slowly approached, her tone unreadable. Minor injury, changing medicine. Lucretia looked him up and down, her gaze stopping on his bandaged arm. She suddenly smiled. Myra, that girl's skills are good, right? Gentle and careful. Is she much more considerate than this half-old woman like me? There was a thorn in these words. Lynx heard it, but his face remained unchanged. Madam is joking. Miss Myra is a healer. It's her duty. Duty. Lucretia sneered and got closer, lowering her voice. I heard you have been going to the medical room every day recently, staying for half a day each time. What, have you taken a fancy to that girl? Lynx looked at her. Is Madam jealous? Me, jealous? Lucretia laughed coldly. You are worthy. I'm just reminding you that Batiatus hates his subordinates messing around the most, especially with people from the medical room. If any gossip spreads and affects the gladiator's condition, he will be unhappy. Thank you for the reminder, madam. Lynx said flatly. I will pay attention. Lucretia stared at him for a few seconds, then her tone suddenly turned soft and charming. However, if you really want a woman, there is a way. Tonight, the old place. She was talking about the bathhouse. Lynx quickly weighed it in his heart. He couldn't cut off the line with Lucretia. She was pregnant now. Although it was still unknown, she would know sooner or later. He had to stabilize her. Okay. He nodded. Tonight. Lucretia smiled with satisfaction and reached out to straighten his collar. That's right. Remember, what I can give you is much more than that little girl. After saying that, she turned and left, her skirt swaying. Lynx looked at her departing back, his eyes sinking. Chapter 13. In the evening, the bathhouse. Steam filled the hot water pool. Lucretia was even more proactive than last time. She almost pressed against him as soon as she entered the door. Lynx could feel that her mood was not right, with a kind of suppressed irritability and unease. Here 10,000 words are omitted. After it was over, the two leaned against the edge of the pool. Batiatus has been contacting gladiator bosses from other cities recently. Lucretia suddenly spoke, her voice carrying post-event laziness. He wants to organize a cross-city performance match. The scale is very large. The Notice training camp is just the appetizer. The real main event is behind. Lynx's heart moved. When? After next month's performance match. Lucretia said. If you win, Batiatus's reputation will rise greatly. At that time, he can pull in more bosses to participate. He plans to organize an all-star gladiator team to perform in Rome. Go to Rome? Lynx narrowed his eyes. That was not a good place. Rome's arena was bigger, the audience more picky, and gladiators died faster. You want me to go? It's not that I want. Lucretia turned around and faced him. It's Batiatus who wants it. He thinks you have potential. If you can go through the tempering of a few large performances, you might become a real gladiator star. At that time, money, fame, freedom, none of them will be a problem. Lynx didn't speak. Lucretia stared at him, but you must first win next month's performance match. The Nodes training camp will not let you go easily. I heard they are secretly training a new weapon, a kind of net with barbs, specially designed to deal with flexible gladiators. Net with barbs? Lynx remembered it. Also, Lucretia continued, as for Crixus, he has almost recovered, but he is holding a fire in his heart. In the performance match, he may deliberately create chaos to put you in danger. You have to guard against him. I know. Lynx nodded. Lucretia looked at him for a while, then suddenly sighed. Lynx, I know you are not simple. You have ambition, you have ability, and you don't want to be a gladiator for a lifetime. But in this place, ability alone is not enough. You also need someone to help you. She reached out and traced her fingertips across his chest. I can help you. Batiatus's plans, opponent intelligence, even, some special channels, I can get them all. But the premise is... What is the premise? The premise is that you must make me feel it is worth it. Lucretia leaned closer, her breath spraying on his face. Don't put all your thoughts on that little healer. She can't help you with anything and will only drag you down. Lynx understood. This was a warning and also a transaction. I understand. Madam, rest assured, I know what to do. Lucretia smiled with satisfaction and kissed him. Very good. Then prepare well. In next month's performance match, I will be watching you from the audience seats. Leaving the bathhouse, Lynx returned to his cell. He lay on the bed, the information of the day in his mind. On Myra's side, favorability was steadily rising, but he couldn't rush for now. On Lucretia's side, he needed to stabilize her. The information she provided was very valuable. Crixus, Nodes training camp, net with barbs, Batiatus's Rome plan. One by one. Lynx muttered to himself. First settle next month's performance match. He closed his eyes and simulated various possible situations in his mind. Net with barbs, how to break it? Crixus's possible betrayal, how to guard against it? And that all-star team going to Rome plan. Thinking about it, he fell asleep. Moonlight came in through the wooden window and landed on his face. Calm, but firm. Outside the training ground, Capua's night was still noisy. Drunken singing came from the tavern, red lanterns hung at the entrance of the brothel, noble mansions were brightly lit, and slaves hurried through the dark alleys. This city was like a sleeping giant beast, and the gladiator training camp was just a small flea on its body. But sometimes, a flea can also make the giant beast restless. Lynx turned over, his dreams full of swords and blades. In the small house of the medical room, Myra was organizing herbs under the lamp. She picked up the small clay jar Lynx left today. It was empty, the ointment was all used up. She touched the smooth surface of the clay jar and remembered the butterfly story he told. A slight smile unconsciously appeared on her lips. But soon, the smile faded. She shook her head, put the clay jar back on the shelf, and blew out the oil lamp. Darkness enveloped the small house. In the distance came the noisy sounds of gladiators drinking and having fun, and suppressed crying from some unknown cell. The day of the performance match was getting closer day by day. The atmosphere in the training ground was like a taut bowstring, getting tighter and tighter. The instructor's rattan whip lashed harder than usual, the gladiators roared louder during training than usual, and even the kitchen slave's footsteps when delivering food became much lighter, afraid of offending anyone's bad mood. Lynx's days were still relatively calm. Crixus had become much more honest since that day he was hit with the groin kick. At least in the training ground. He no longer took the initiative to provoke. He just looked at Lynx with colder eyes, like a knife quenched with poison. Myra's ointment was very effective. The bruises on his arm mostly disappeared in 3 days. Lynx still went to the medical room to change medicine every day and chatted with Myra a few words. Sometimes he told some cold jokes from his previous life, sometimes he listened to her talk about who she treated today. Myra gradually talked more and occasionally smiled. When she smiled, her eyes curved, very clean. On Lucretia's side, Lynx maintained the frequency of regular reports. Every 2 or 3 days he went to the bathhouse once, listening to her talk about Batiatus's new movements or small news from the Nodes training camp. Net with barbs, Crixus might trip him up, Batiatus's Rome plan. Lynx remembered all this information in his heart, but on the surface he remained calm. His current focus was training and completing that established prestige system task. 10 days passed, and the task progress reached 5/10. In addition to Gisco and Amir, 3 more gladiators who were willing to follow him were added, all young people struggling at the bottom of the training ground, either thin or honest, often bullied. Lynx taught them a few practical self-defense skills and occasionally shared some black bread with them, thus winning their hearts. It wasn't any great favor, but in this place, a little goodwill could be exchanged for loyalty. At least temporary loyalty. This afternoon, just after training ended, Lynx was preparing to go to the medical room when the slave beside Batiatus came again. "Master wants you to go to the study, now." Lynx frowned. Batiatus had been calling him more frequently lately. Sometimes to ask about training, sometimes to talk about performance match tactics, sometimes just to chat, the kind of seemingly casual but actually probing conversation in every sentence. The old fox was evaluating his value and also evaluating his threat. Lynx followed the slave through the training ground and went up to the 2nd floor of the main building. When passing the corridor window, he glimpsed a few unfamiliar faces in the corner of the courtyard, not people from the training ground, wearing elaborate togas, talking to Batiatus with serious expressions. Batiatus had his back to the window, nodding and bowing, his posture very low. Lynx's heart moved. Who were those people? From the Nodes training camp? Or other gladiator bosses? He didn't have time to look carefully. The slave had already pushed open the study door. "Master, Lynx has arrived." Batiatus was sitting behind the desk, holding a sheepskin scroll in his hand, his face not looking good. Seeing Lynx come in, he waved his hand. The slave retreated and closed the door. "Sit," Batiatus said, his voice a bit hoarse. Lynx sat down opposite him and didn't speak. The study was quiet for a few seconds. Batiatus put down the sheepskin scroll, rubbed his temples, and then looked up at Lynx. "How is the training?" "Not bad." "Is the arm injury healed?" "Healed." "What about Crixus? Has he been honest lately?" "Quite honest." The two asked and answered mechanically. Batiatus stared at Lynx for a while, then suddenly smiled. "You are quite calm. Aren't you going to ask who I was meeting in the courtyard just now?" Lynx also smiled. "If master wants to tell me, he naturally will." "Sly." Batiatus shook his head. Took out a folded papyrus from the drawer, and pushed it over. "Take a look." Lynx unfolded the papyrus. On it was a simple diagram for people, in pairs, marked with weapons and positions, with dense notes beside them in Latin. Lynx now had Latin language mastery and read it effortlessly. Chapter 14. The 4 people sent by the Nodes training camp this time have the codenames Anvil, Hammer, Viper, and Spider respectively. Batiatus pointed at the diagram and said, "Anvil and Hammer are a group. They are strength types, responsible for frontal assault. Viper is fast, uses short sword and dagger, specializes in attacking vital points. Spider, uses a net with barbs. Lynx carefully looked at the diagram. The four people's positions were very particular. Anvil and hammer in front, attracting firepower. Viper wandering on the flank, looking for opportunities. Spider at the back, ready to cast the net to control at any time. A typical encirclement and killing formation. Their tactics are very clear. Batiatus continued, first use anvil and hammer to pin down Crixus. That guy has great strength, but his brain is not good, easy to be provoked. Once Crixus is entangled, Viper and Spider will go all out against you. Lynx nodded, a very reasonable tactic. So you cannot fight according to their rhythm. Batiatus leaned forward. My suggestion is to launch a strong attack on Spider at the start. Without the net, their control chain is broken. As long as you can quickly solve Spider, the remaining three, you and Crixus 2 against 3, the chance of winning will be much greater. Lynx did not express his opinion immediately. He stared at the diagram, rapidly deducing in his mind. Strong attack on Spider, sounds good, but the problem is that Spider stands at the back. There are anvil and hammer blocking in front, and Viper ready to support beside him. It is not easy to break through. Moreover, will Crixus cooperate? That guy now hates him to the bone. It would be good if he doesn't stab him in the back during the performance match. How can he expect him to cover him? Regarding Crixus, Lynx opened his mouth. I will talk to him. Batiatus interrupted him. The performance match concerns my face and money bag. He doesn't dare to act recklessly, at least not openly. Not openly, but secretly. Lynx didn't ask out loud, but he knew in his heart. There is one more thing. Batiatus took out a small wooden box from the drawer again and pushed it over. Open it and take a look. Lynx opened the wooden box. Inside was a short sword. But it was not the standard short sword from the training camp. This sword's blade was narrower and thinner, with a dull metallic luster. The hilt was wrapped in leather, with an excellent grip. The most special thing was a shallow blood groove on the spine of the sword, extending all the way to the tip. Made of refined steel. Batiatus said. I bought it from a Greek merchant. It cost 30 denarii. Much stronger than those broken things you usually use. Lynx picked up the short sword and weighed it. The weight was moderate, the center of gravity perfect. He casually swung it. The sound of breaking air was much sharper than the swords he usually used. Good sword. Of course it's a good sword. Batiatus smiled. This is for saving your life. Use this sword in the performance match. Lynx raised his eyes. Why? Because I want you to win. Batiatus said word by word. And to win beautifully. This sword can let you solve the opponent faster, bleed less, get injured less. Injured gladiators can't participate in subsequent performances. Subsequent performances. Lynx remembered the Rome plan Lucretia mentioned. I understand. He put away the sword. Thank you, master. No need to thank me. Batiatus leaned back in his chair, his tone suddenly becoming meaningful. Lynx, I know you are not willing to be just a gladiator. You have ambition. I can see it. That's good. People with ambition can achieve things. He paused and continued, but you have to remember, ambition needs strength to support it, and it also needs timing. Your timing has not come yet. First win the performance match, get your freedom. I will help you pave the way after that. These words sounded grand, but Lynx heard the subtext. If you obey, you will have meat to eat. If you don't obey, dead end. I will win. Lynx repeated. Good. Batiatus nodded with satisfaction. Go ahead. Take the sword back and practice more, get familiar with the feel. Lynx stood up, saluted, and exited the study. The corridor was empty. He walked to the window and looked down. The few unfamiliar faces in the courtyard were gone, and Batiatus was not there either. Only a few slaves were cleaning the courtyard, their movements lazy. Lynx gripped the wooden box in his hand tightly. Refined steel short sword, 30 denarii. Batiatus really spent a lot this time. But behind this heavy investment was expectation and pressure. If he wins, everything is fine. If he loses, this sword might be his burial item. Lynx took a deep breath and turned back to the training ground. When he reached the corner of the stairs, he suddenly stopped. At the end of the corridor, Lucretia's room door was open a crack. Through the gap, he could see her sitting in front of the dressing table, back to the door, her shoulders slightly shaking, as if she was crying. Lynx frowned and was about to go over to take a look when footsteps came from behind. It was the slave from earlier, carrying a tray with a wine jug and cups on it. "Wine for madam," the slave said softly, knocked on the door, and entered the room. Before the door closed, Lynx heard Lucretia's voice with a crying tone, "Put it there, get out." The slave came out, closed the door, and hurried away. Lynx stood in place, thought for a moment, and still didn't go to knock on the door. It was not the time now. He went downstairs, returned to the training ground, found a deserted corner, opened the wooden box, and took out the refined steel short sword. The sword flashed with cold light in the sunlight. He held the sword in his hand and made a few thrusting movements. It was indeed handy. The blade was light but high in strength, with almost no resistance when swung. The blood groove design made it easier to pull out after stabbing, without getting stuck in bones. A good tool for killing. Lynx practiced for a while and suddenly felt something was wrong. He stopped and carefully examined the blade. Sword spine, blade edge, hilt, all fine. But he always felt that Batiatus giving him this sword was not just to let him win. The old fox never did anything with only one purpose. Lynx thought for a moment, took out that bottle of mild aphrodisiac perfume from the system space. He opened the cap and smelled it colorless and odorless. Then, he dropped a drop of the perfume on the leather wrapping of the sword hilt. The perfume quickly seeped into the leather and disappeared. System, is this perfume effective on skin contact? Mild aphrodisiac perfume can take effect through air volatilization or skin contact. Skin contact effect is weaker, but the duration is longer. Lynx nodded. He put the sword back in the wooden box, returned it to his cell, and then went to the medical room. Myra was bandaging a head wound on a gladiator. That guy had his head broken by a wooden sword during training, blood all over his face. Seeing Lynx come in, Myra looked up and smiled, motioning for him to wait a moment. Lynx sat down on the long bench at the door and watched Myra skillfully clean the wound, apply medicine, and bandage. Her movements were very light, and she was softly comforting the gladiator who was grimacing in pain. "Endure it, it'll be done soon, yes, just like that." That gladiator was a big guy, but in front of Myra he was as obedient as a cat. After bandaging, Myra patted his shoulder, "Come back tomorrow to change the medicine. Remember not to get it wet." "Thank you, Sister Myra." The gladiator smiled foolishly and got up to leave. Myra then turned to Lynx, "Why so late today?" "Batiatus called me." Lynx walked over, sat down, and extended his left arm. Actually, the injury had already healed, but he still came to change medicine every day as an excuse. Myra untied the old bandage and checked, basically healed. Apply medicine for one more day to consolidate. She turned to get the ointment. Lynx looked at her busy back and suddenly said, "Myra, if someone gives you a very good weapon, but you feel that weapon might have a problem, what would you do?" Myra's hand paused. She turned to look at him. "The weapon has a problem." It's just. I always feel something is wrong, but I can't say what it is. Chapter 15. Myra thought for a moment and said softly, "My father used to say that hunters don't give their best bow and arrows to others unless they want that person to hunt the beast they can't kill." Lynx's heart shook. These words woke him up. Batiatus giving him the refined steel short sword was not because he valued him so much, but because the beast in the next fight was too fierce and needed a sharper blade. What was that beast? The 4 people from the Nodes training camp? Or something else? Your father was very smart, Lynx said. Myra smiled, a bit bitter. Unfortunately, being smart couldn't save his life. She applied the ointment on Lynx and rebandaged it. By the way, Myra suddenly said, "Be careful with your diet recently. I heard yesterday that someone in the kitchen was adding something to the gladiator's food." Lynx's eyes narrowed, adding what? I don't know. Myra shook her head. A slave who delivers firewood secretly told me. He saw the kitchen steward pour some white powder into the stew pot. He can't read and doesn't know what it was, but he felt something was wrong. White powder. Drugging. Lynx remembered what Batiatus had said earlier: the Nodes training camp might drug the food. Had they already started? Thank you for telling me, Lynx said seriously. Myra's face reddened. I just felt I should tell you. You saved my brother. Your brother? Amir. Myra said in a low voice. He is my half-brother from the same father. He used to be bullied all the time. After you taught him a few moves, he is much better now. Lynx then remembered that Amir had indeed said his sister worked in the training ground. It turned out to be Myra. No need to thank me, Lynx said. Amir is quite clever. He is a good seedling. Myra smiled. This time the smile was sincere. Thank you. After bandaging, Lynx left the medical room. He didn't return to his cell. Instead, he went straight to the kitchen. It was time to prepare dinner. The kitchen was steaming hot, and several slaves were busy. The thin and tall steward was directing them, cursing non-stop. Lynx stood at the door and didn't go in. He observed for a while. The thin and tall steward moved nimbly, but his eyes were shifty. He kept glancing at a small locked cabinet in the corner. Lynx remembered it. At dinner time, the gladiators gathered in the mess hall, holding wooden bowls and lining up for stewed beans and black bread. Lynx stood in the middle of the line. When it was his turn, the one serving the food was a young slave. His hands were a bit shaking. Lynx stared at him. The young slave lowered his head, scooped a large spoonful of stewed beans into his bowl, and gave him a piece of black bread. Thank you, Lynx said softly. The young slave was stunned for a moment, looked up at him, his eyes a bit panicked, and quickly lowered his head again. Lynx carried the bowl to a corner and sat down. He didn't eat immediately. He looked at the stewed beans in the bowl. It looked the same as usual, a sticky lump. He looked at the black bread hard, and when broken open, the inside was also normal color. But he was not at ease. After the people around started eating, he picked up the spoon, scooped a small mouthful of beans, and put it in his mouth. The taste was a bit strange. Not the kind of strange from spoilage, but with a faint, almost undetectable bitter taste. Very slight. If you didn't pay attention, you couldn't taste it at all. Lynx swallowed it and waited for a while. His body had no reaction. But he still decided not to eat any more. He took the opportunity when no one was paying attention and poured the remaining beans into an empty bucket in the corner, keeping only the black bread. This one seemed fine. At night, the training ground gradually quieted down. Lynx lay on the straw mat in his cell and didn't sleep. He was waiting. Waiting for a possible system prompt. But one night passed, and nothing happened. The next morning, he trained as usual, went to the medical room to change medicine as usual, and observed the mess hall situation as usual. Everything was normal. But that feeling of something being wrong became stronger and stronger. After training ended in the afternoon, Lynx went to find Gisco. Gisco was wiping his sword. Seeing him come over, he grinned, "What's up?" "Asking you something." Lynx sat down beside him. "Have you felt anything strange with the taste of the food recently?" Gisco was stunned. "Taste? No, it's as bad as usual." "Think carefully." Gisco frowned and thought for a while, then suddenly said, "Now that you mention it, the stewed beans do seem a bit more bitter than before, but I always thought the cook was cutting corners and the beans weren't cooked well." Lynx had a good idea. It wasn't targeting him alone. Everyone's food had been tampered with. But the dose was very light. So light that it was almost unnoticeable and wouldn't produce obvious effects immediately. Chronic poison? Or some kind of drug that weakens physical strength? "What's wrong?" Gisco asked. "Is there a problem?" "Possibly," Lynx said. "Be careful with your meals these days. Try not to eat if you can. The black bread should be fine." Gisco's face became serious. "Someone is drugging the food." "Not sure, but it's always better to be on guard." "Fuck." Gisco cursed. "It must be those bastards from Nodes. Weakening our strength before the performance match. Really sinister." Lynx didn't speak. He felt it might not necessarily be Nodes. The kitchen of the training camp was firmly controlled by Batiatus. Outsiders would find it very difficult to tamper with it. Unless, there was an insider. Or Batiatus himself allowed it. Why? To make the performance match more exciting? To make the gladiators weaker, fight more brutally, and make the audience more stimulated? Lynx remembered Batiatus's face that always had a smile. The old fox was really capable of doing it. "Thank you, brother." Gisco patted his shoulder. "I will be careful." "Should we tell the others about this?" Lynx thought for a moment and shook his head, "Not for now. Without evidence, saying it would only alert the enemy. Privately remind a few trustworthy ones." "Understood." After leaving Gisco, Lynx returned to his cell. He took out the refined steel short sword from under the straw mat and checked it carefully again. This time, he found something. At the end of the hilt, the metal ball used for balance had an almost invisible seam. Lynx pried at the seam with his fingernail. The seam was tight and wouldn't open. He thought for a moment, took out the ointment jar Myra had given him from the system space. The edge of the clay jar was thin but hard enough. He carefully pried the seam with the edge of the jar. Click. With a light sound, the metal ball opened. Inside was empty. But there was a tiny bit of white powder on the inner wall. Very little, so little that if you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't notice it at all. Lynx dipped a bit with his finger and smelled it. Colorless and odorless. Different from the bitter taste in the food. What was this? He didn't dare taste it. He wiped his finger clean with cloth and closed the metal ball again. Now he understood. This sword was indeed a good sword. But it was also a poisoned sword. Something was hidden in the hilt. It could be poison or something else. When he held the sword for a long time during battle, his palm sweating and heating up, those powders might slowly seep out and enter the body through the skin. Chronic poisoning? Physical strength decline? Or even more terrible consequences? What exactly did Batiatus want to do? Lynx stared at the sword in his hand, his eyes becoming colder and colder. The old fox gave him this sword not to let him win. It was to let him, slowly get ruined in the process of winning. Win the performance match, become a star, then go to Rome. But a gladiator who has been chronically poisoned, how long can he live? By the time he reaches Rome, he will either die in the arena or retire due to accidental injury or illness. and Batiatus will have squeezed all the value from him. Good calculation. Really fucking good calculation. Lynx put the sword back in the wooden box and placed it under the straw mat. He lay back on the straw mat and looked at the ceiling. Moonlight came in through the wooden window, casting cold shadows on the ground. The smell of conspiracy was getting thicker and thicker. But he couldn't rush. He couldn't alert the enemy. At least for now, he still needed Batiatus's support and this good sword to win the performance match. As for the poison system, he asked in his heart, is there a way to detect or neutralize toxins? Host can exchange for beginner toxin resistance, requires 800 points. Current points, 500 points. Still half short. Lynx closed his eyes. Then endure it for now. Win first. After winning the performance match and getting freedom, then settle the accounts slowly. Chapter 16. 3 days before the performance match, Batiatus announced a piece of news. Tomorrow, rest from training for 1 day. The kitchen has prepared double portions of meat and wine. There will be a bonfire at night to celebrate the victory in advance. The training ground instantly exploded. Rest from training? Double meat? And wine? The gladiators were stunned at first, then burst into earth-shaking cheers. These guys struggling on the line between life and death had not smelled the real flavor of revelry for too long. Even the usually most gloomy ones showed a bit of smile on their faces. Only Lynx sneered coldly in his heart. Celebrate victory? The performance match hadn't even been fought yet. Celebrate what? This was Batiatus's usual trick, using wine and meat to numb the gladiators' nerves, make them relax their vigilance, and by the way, observe who would show their flaws when relaxed. The old fox never did unprofitable business. The next afternoon, a bonfire pile was set up in the open space in the center of the training ground. Kitchen slaves carried out several barrels of low-quality wine, the kind that was so sour it made your teeth ache, but with a decent alcohol content. The large pot of stewed meat gave off a rare meaty aroma. Although most of it was scraps, it was enough to make the gladiators' eyes green. In the evening, the bonfire was lit. The flames crackled, reflecting faces soaked in sweat and dust. The gladiators sat around the bonfire, holding wooden bowls in their hands. The bowls contained murky wine and greasy chunks of meat. Laughter, cursing, and the sound of clashing bowls mixed together. The air was filled with the rough smell of alcohol, sweat, and meat. Lynx sat in a slightly farther corner, also holding a bowl in his hand, but he didn't drink much. He was observing. Crixus sat directly opposite the bonfire, surrounded by a few lackeys. He had already downed more than half a bowl of wine. His face was red and his neck thick. He was loudly boasting about his past battle achievements. Gisco and a few Gaul gladiators sat on the other side, singing in their hometown language while drinking. The tune was desolate. Amir squeezed beside Lynx, sipping the wine in small mouthfuls. His eyes were bright. He obviously rarely experienced such occasions. Myra also came. As a healer, she was allowed to participate. She didn't squeeze with the gladiators, but sat far away on the steps under the eaves, quietly watching the bonfire, holding a cup of clear water in her hands. Lucretia did not appear in this kind of occasion. Batiatus would not let her show her face. Lynx was watching when his shoulder was suddenly patted. Hey! Lynx! Why aren't you drinking? A half-drunk gladiator came over. It was Marcus, who had been thrown into the sand pit by him a few days ago. This guy now looked at Lynx with complex eyes, fear and unwillingness, but with the alcohol kicking in, his courage also grew. Saving my capacity, waiting for you to toast me. Lynx raised his bowl and clinked it with his. Marcus grinned, tilted his head and gulped a large mouthful, wiped his mouth. You kid, although a bit sinister, you are hard enough. In the performance match, kill those bastards from Nodes. Definitely. Lynx raised his bowl. Marcus staggered away and went to pester others to drink. Lynx put down his bowl and swept his gaze over the crowd. He saw the instructor sitting on the other side of the bonfire, whispering something with a steward sent by Batiatus. His eyes occasionally glanced this way. He also saw the thin and tall steward from the kitchen, diligently refilling wine for the gladiators, but every time he passed by Crixus's group, he would stay a little longer and pour especially full. There was a problem. Lynx remained calm. He raised his bowl, pretended to drink, but actually only wet his lips. The night grew deeper, the bonfire burned brighter. Alcohol began to take effect. The gladiators' voices grew louder. Some started wrestling for fun, some sang with hoarse voices, some put their arms around each other's shoulders and bragged. The suppressed atmosphere of the training ground was completely released in this short indulgence. Lynx noticed that Crixus's side was the most rowdy. That guy had already drunk until his eyes were red. He was pressing a lackey to the ground, using brute force to twist the man's arm. The lackey screamed in pain, but the people around laughed loudly. Crixus! Enough! The instructor finally couldn't stand it and shouted to stop him. Crixus let go, staggered to his feet, glared at the instructor, burped, and said, "What? Can't I have some fun?" The instructor's face looked ugly, but he didn't say anything else. The performance match was imminent, he didn't want any extra trouble. Crixus smiled triumphantly, his gaze swept over the crowd, and finally landed on Lynx. He pushed aside the people beside him and staggered over. The light of the bonfire danced on his face, reflecting a ferocious drunken face. The surroundings gradually quieted down. Everyone was looking this way. Amir nervously leaned closer to Lynx. Lynx sat without moving, still holding the bowl he hadn't drunk much from. Crixus walked in front of him, looked down at him, and sprayed alcohol breath. "Lynx, why are you sitting here alone? Can't afford to drink." "Poor alcohol tolerance, saving some," Lynx said flatly. "Poor alcohol tolerance." Crixus sneered. "Then how are you going to fight in the performance match? Do you want me to teach you how to drink?" As he spoke, he reached out to grab the bowl in Lynx's hand. Lynx twisted his wrist, the bowl avoided his hand, still held steadily. "No need to trouble yourself." Crixus grabbed empty air, his face sank. He stared at Lynx, suddenly grinned, turned and shouted to the crowd, "Brothers! Our great hero Lynx has poor alcohol tolerance. How can this be? The performance match is about seeing blood. If he doesn't even dare to drink wine, how dare he see blood?" A few gladiators close to him started to heckle. "Yeah. Drink one. Don't be a coward, Lynx. Be a man and do it." The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Gisco stood up and wanted to say something, but was stopped by Lynx's look. Lynx looked at Crixus and slowly stood up. He was half a head shorter than Crixus, and his build was also much slimmer. But standing there, his presence was not weak at all. "Crixus." He spoke, his voice not loud, but enough for the people around to hear. "I can drink the wine, but before drinking, I have a question for you." "What question?" In the performance match, Lynx stared into his eyes. "Do you want to win, or do you want me to die?" This question was very direct and sharp. The surroundings instantly fell into dead silence. Even the crackling of the bonfire sounded harsh. Crixus's drunkenness faded a bit, his eyes flickering. He didn't expect Lynx to bring it up so openly in front of so many people. What do you mean?" He stiffened his neck. "The meaning is very simple." Lynx took a step forward, almost sticking to him. "If you only want me to die, then there is no need for me to drink this wine. Anyway, I will get stabbed in the back on the field. It's better to save some energy now. If you still want to win and get freedom, then put aside personal grudges. After winning the performance match, however you want to settle the score, I will accompany you. He paused and raised the bowl in his hand. Choose one, now. Everyone's eyes were focused on Crixus's face. The firelight illuminated his twisted expression. He looked at Lynx, then at the gladiators around him who were staring at him. Many of them had expectation in their eyes, or rather, a desire for victory. If they win the performance match, everyone benefits. If they lose, everyone suffers. Even the stupidest person understood this truth. Crixus gritted his teeth and finally squeezed out a sentence from his throat, "Of course I want to win." "Good." Lynx nodded and raised his bowl. "Then this bowl is to victory." He tilted his head back and poured all the remaining wine in the bowl down his throat. The wine was very sour, very astringent, burning his throat. But his face didn't change color. After drinking, he turned the bowl upside down. Not a drop left. Crixus stared at him. His facial muscles twitched a few times. In the end, he also raised his own bowl, gulped it down, and then slammed the bowl hard on the ground. To victory. The surroundings erupted in cheers. The tense atmosphere instantly eased. Gisco led the applause, and the other gladiators followed suit. "Well done. That's more like it. Kill notice." Crixus panted heavily, glared at Lynx, turned and staggered back to his group, and didn't cause any more trouble. Chapter 17. Lynx sat back in his original position. Amir said in a low voice, "Big brother, you really dared to drink that wine." "It's fine." Lynx waved his hand. He was indeed fine. That bit of wine was nothing to his current physique. Moreover, when he drank just now, he deliberately used the edge of the bowl to block most of it. He actually drank very little. But what he wanted was exactly this effect, forcing Crixus to take a stance in public and temporarily suppressing the conflict. At least before the performance match ended, that guy wouldn't dare to act recklessly on the surface. The bonfire continued to burn. The gladiators started making noise again, as if the earlier interlude had never happened. Lynx was about to get up to get some air when he suddenly heard a commotion from the entrance of the training ground. He looked up. A few well-dressed men and women, accompanied by Batiatus, walked into the training ground. Nobles. Lynx narrowed his eyes. The leader was a man in his 40s, wearing a toga with purple borders, the mark of the senatorial class. Beside him was a young woman, in her early 20s, wearing an expensive silk long skirt, exquisite makeup, and her eyes carried a superior curiosity and a trace of frivolity. She was pointing at the gladiators by the bonfire, talking to Batiatus, laughing as she spoke. Batiatus nodded and bowed, his face full of smiles. "Who is that?" Amir asked in a low voice. "I don't know." Lynx paused. "But they definitely didn't come to send warmth." As expected, Batiatus led those nobles to the side of the bonfire, clapped his hands, and signaled everyone to be quiet. "Honored guests heard about our revelry and specially came to visit." Batiatus's voice was loud. "This is Senator Gaius Valerius and his daughter, Lady Livia. Everyone welcome." Sparse applause. Most of the gladiators were half drunk and had no reverence for nobles. They just looked at them curiously. Senator Valerius nodded slightly, his posture arrogant. His daughter Livia boldly looked around at the gladiators, her gaze lingering on those strong-bodied men, and finally, stopped on Lynx. Lynx frowned. Livia smiled, turned to her father and said something. Batiatus nodded and beckoned to Lynx. "Lynx, come over." Lynx stood up and walked over. "This is Lynx, the new star of our training camp and the main force in next month's performance match," Batiatus introduced. Livia looked Lynx up and down, her eyes like evaluating a piece of merchandise. "He looks quite sturdy. I heard you knocked Crixus down a few days ago." "Just a spar. Lynx said flatly. A spar. Livia chuckled. I heard you kicked him until he was almost ruined. Quite ruthless. She took 2 steps forward, almost sticking to Lynx, looked up at him, and lowered her voice, I like ruthless men. Lynx smelled the strong perfume on her, mixed with alcohol. Miss overpraises. He retreated half a step, creating distance. Livia didn't mind and smiled even more happily. She turned to her father and said, Father, I think this gladiator is good. After the performance match, how about buying him? As a guard, or something else? Senator Valerius frowned, Livia, don't make trouble. I'm not making trouble. Livia pouted. Anyway, after the performance match he will be a free man. Can't I spend money to hire him? Batiatus's eyes lit up. He quickly chimed in, of course. If Lynx can win the performance match, he will indeed be a free man. If Miss Livia is interested at that time, I can help make the connection. Lynx sneered in his heart. They were already arranging his future? The performance match hadn't even been fought yet, and they were already planning to sell him as a commodity. He was about to speak when he caught a glimpse from the corner of his eye. Myra was looking at him from under the eaves, her eyes full of worry. Lynx shook his head slightly at her, indicating that it was fine. At this moment, Livia suddenly reached out, wanting to touch the muscles on Lynx's arm. Lynx sidestepped to avoid it. Miss, please respect yourself. Livia's hand stopped in mid-air, her face sinking. You, a gladiator, dare to dodge. Gladiators are also people. Lynx said calmly. People. Livia sneered. You are slaves. You are commodities. I can touch if I want, buy if I want. The atmosphere instantly froze. Batiatus broke out in a sweat, wanting to smooth things over, but not daring to offend the nobles. Senator Valerius's face also didn't look good. He rebuked in a low voice, Livia. Enough. But Livia was obviously spoiled. Not only did she not restrain herself, she became even more aggressive. She pointed at Lynx and said to Batiatus, Batiatus, I want him now. Name a price. This is against the rules. Batiatus wiped his sweat. Before the performance match, gladiators cannot. I don't care. Livia interrupted him. I want him. Now. The gladiators around all looked over, their eyes filled with anger, but also helplessness and numbness. They had seen this kind of scene many times. If nobles wanted to play, you had to play along. Resist. Light punishment was whipping, heavy was death. Lynx clenched his fists. But he couldn't make a move. If he made a move now, all previous efforts would be wasted. He took a deep breath and was about to speak when a gentle but clear voice suddenly sounded. Miss Livia, forcing others is not the demeanor a noble should have. Everyone turned to look. Myra walked over from under the eaves. She stood beside Lynx, looked up at Livia, her eyes calm but with an unquestionable firmness. Who are you? Livia frowned. I am the healer here, Myra. Myra walked to Lynx's side. Lynx has an arm injury and needs rest. He is not suitable to be touched. Healer. Livia looked her up and down and sneered. A female slave also dares to speak to me. I am a slave, but I am speaking the truth. Myra was neither humble nor arrogant. If you really appreciate Mr. Lynx, you should hope he participates in the performance match in his best condition, instead of disturbing him now. Livia was choked. Her face turned red and white. Senator Valerius glanced at Myra, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He then pulled his daughter, all right Livia, stop making trouble. We should go. Father. Go. Senator Valerius forcibly pulled the unwilling daughter and turned to leave. Batiatus hurriedly followed, smiling and apologizing all the way. The nobles left. The training ground was quiet for a few seconds, then low discussions erupted. Sister Myra is awesome. Daring to talk back to nobles. But this will cause trouble. Myra's face was a bit pale, but she stood straight. Lynx looked at her, a complex emotion surging in his heart. You shouldn't have stepped forward, he said in a low voice. I couldn't watch them bully you. Myra's voice trembled a bit, but her eyes were exceptionally firm. Lynx was silent for a while, then suddenly smiled. Thank you. Myra's face reddened and she lowered her head. I just said what should be said. She turned to leave. Lynx called her. Myra. After the performance match. Lynx looked at her. If I can get my freedom, are you willing to leave this place? Myra was stunned. Her eyes slowly widened. She didn't finish. From the side came Gisco's loud voice. Lynx. Come. Drink. Don't just chat with the girl. The gladiators started making noise again. The earlier interlude seemed forgotten. Chapter 18. Myra looked at Lynx, her eyes complex. In the end, she said nothing, turned around and walked back under the eaves. Lynx stood in place, looking at her back. He knew that the question he asked just now was too sudden and too abrupt. But he didn't regret it. The bonfire continued to burn. The night grew deeper. Most of the gladiators were drunk, lying scattered around the bonfire, snoring loudly. Lynx wasn't drunk. He sat in the corner, looking at the jumping flames, everything that happened tonight in his mind. Crixus's temporary compromise. The sudden visit of the nobles. Myra's stepping forward. And, that poisoned sword hidden under the straw mat. The performance match was getting closer, and the undercurrents under the water were also getting more urgent. He could feel that Batiatus was laying out a plan, Nodes was calculating, Crixus was waiting for an opportunity, and even those nobles might become variables. And he must tear open a path of survival in this increasingly tightening net. Just as he was thinking, a figure staggered over and sat down beside him. It was Gisco. This guy was flushed from drinking, but his eyes were still relatively clear. Just now, thanks. Gisco burped. If not for you, that bastard Crixus would have caused trouble again tonight. Small matter. Gisco was silent for a while, then suddenly lowered his voice. Lynx, the performance match, do you really think we can win? What do you think? I don't know. Gisco shook his head. The 4 people from Nodes are not easy to deal with, and I always feel that Batiatus didn't tell us the truth. Lynx looked at him. Gisco continued, I have been mixing here for 5 years and have seen too many bosses. Batiatus is one of the most cunning. He never does unprofitable business. This performance match, the bet he placed is too big, abnormally big. You think he is plotting something? I don't know. Gisco shook his head again. But I have a feeling that the performance match might be just the beginning. If we win, more trouble. If we lose, dead end. Lynx didn't speak. What Gisco said was exactly what he was worried about. But Gisco suddenly smiled and patted Lynx's shoulder. Who cares? Anyway, we are already on the pirate ship. There is no way to get off. Brother, in the performance match, I will do my best to help you. Not for Batiatus, but for, we are all poor people struggling in this hellhole. After saying that, he staggered to his feet and went to get more wine. Lynx looked at his back, feeling a bit warm in his heart. At least, in this cold place, there were still a few people worth trusting. The night grew deeper. The bonfire gradually went out, the embers glowing with dark red light. The gladiators lay drunk all over the place, snoring like thunder. Lynx got up, preparing to return to his cell. When passing under the eaves, he saw Myra still sitting there, not leaving. "Why haven't you rested yet?" He walked over. Myra looked up at him. The moonlight shone on her face, very soft. "I was thinking," she said softly. "The words you asked me just now." Lynx sat down beside her. "Have you thought about it?" "Not yet." Myra shook her head. "I don't know. Leave this place, where can I go? I only know how to treat illnesses. Outside is too scary. There are also good people outside." Lynx looked into her eyes. "And, you are not alone." Myra also looked at him. Her eyes were bright under the moonlight. "Lynx, why do you want to help me? We have only known each other for a short time." Lynx thought for a moment and said, "Maybe because you are the cleanest person I have seen in this world." Myra's face reddened again. She shyly lowered her head. The two were silent for a while. In the distance came the footsteps of the night patrol. "I should go back." Myra stood up. "I'll send you." "No need, it's right in front." But she didn't move. Lynx looked at her, suddenly reached out and gently touched her cheek. Myra's body trembled, but she didn't dodge. After the performance match, Lynx paused before saying, "Wait for me." After saying that, he turned and left. Myra stood in place, looking at his back disappearing into the darkness, her hand slowly touching the place he had just touched, her face burning hot. This night, some people were drunk and dreaming, some people tossed and turned. The day after the revelry, a decadent atmosphere filled the training ground. Most of the gladiators were still hungover, yawning during training, their movements soft and weak. Lynx was one of the few who remained sober. And since that night's conversation, the atmosphere in the training ground had become somewhat subtle. When Myra saw Lynx, her eyes always dodged, her cheeks slightly red. Her fingers would inadvertently tremble slightly when bandaging wounds. Lynx saw it, but didn't point it out. Some things needed time to ferment. The performance match was still 2 days away. The intensity of training was pushed to the limit. The instructor broke 3 rattan whips. The curses were the same few sentences repeated, but his voice grew louder day by day. The gladiators had more and more bruises and scrapes. The smell of herbs in the medical room was so thick it couldn't be dispersed. Lynx's training focus was on that refined steel short sword. He didn't dare to hold it for long. Before each practice, he would wrap his palm tightly with cloth strips to minimize skin contact with the hilt. After practice, he immediately rinsed it repeatedly with clean water, carefully wiped the sword dry, and put it back in the wooden box. But even so, he could still feel some subtle changes. Easy fatigue. Not physical, but a kind of mental exhaustion. During sword practice, his attention occasionally scattered, and his reaction speed was half a beat slower than usual. Although the degree was very light and almost imperceptible, Lynx knew that the thing in the hilt had already started to take effect. System. He asked in his heart, "Can you detect or neutralize accumulated toxins in my body?" Detecting. Detected trace neuroinhibitor components, accumulation level, mild. Current effects, reaction speed decreased by about 3%, concentration decreased by about 5%. Suggestion. Stop contact with the toxin source, or exchange for beginner toxin resistance. As expected. Lynx looked at the cold gleaming short sword in his hand, his eyes ice cold. 3% and 5% sound like not much. But in the arena, it could be the difference between life and death. The old fox Batiatus calculated it perfectly. The dose was controlled just right. It wouldn't make him collapse immediately, but would slowly erode his condition, ensuring that in the performance match, he was just enough to win, but win with difficulty, win spectacularly. Then what? Win the performance match, become a star, go to Rome with the accumulated poison, fight a few more matches, and finally accidentally retire due to injury or illness, or die directly in the arena. Perfect. Lynx put the sword back in the wooden box and placed it under the straw mat. He now had 500 points, still 300 short of exchanging for beginner toxin resistance. Before the performance match, he must gather enough. How to gather? He opened the system panel and his gaze fell on that establish prestige task. Chapter 19. Task, establish prestige. Requirement, before the performance match, obtain clear loyalty or following from at least 10 gladiators, current, 5/10. Reward, system points x 300, random attribute point x1. Still short 5 people. 300 points, plus the existing 500, makes 800 points. Just enough. But finding 5 more people to pledge loyalty before the performance match is not easy. Time is too tight, and most people in the training ground are still watching. Crixus's remaining influence is still there, Batiatus's shadow covers everything, no one dares to easily choose a side. Unless, there is enough big benefit, or enough big crisis. He can't give too much benefit for now. But crisis. Lynx remembered the kitchen matter. The food was drugged. After Myra's reminder, he had carefully avoided it. Gisco and Amir also privately notified a few trustworthy ones, but most people are still eating. Let them know. If all the gladiators in the training ground know that their food has a problem, their bodies are being slowly eroded, and the boss Batiatus tacitly allowed or even participated in this matter. What will happen? Panic. Anger. Or, resistance. Lynx thought for a moment and shook his head. Too risky. Revealing it now will only alert the enemy. Batiatus will immediately clean the kitchen, destroy the evidence, and then point the finger at the rumor mongers. At that time, not to mention gathering 5 more people, the existing 5 may not be preserved. Need to change the approach. Just as he was thinking, the cell door was knocked. Knock knock. Very light, hesitant knocking. Lynx got up and opened the door. Outside the door stood Amir, his face a bit white, his eyes panicked. Big brother, something happened. What happened? Marcus. Marcus suddenly fainted during training just now. Amir lowered his voice. The instructor said it was heat stroke, but Sister Myra secretly told me that when she checked, she found Marcus's heartbeat was very slow, his pupils were a bit dilated, it doesn't look like heat stroke. Lynx's heart sank. Marcus was the gladiator who was thrown by him several times in the sand pit that day and later clinked bowls with him by the bonfire. Where is he now? Medical room. Sister Myra asked me to call you, said she might have something to tell you. Lynx closed the door and quickly followed Amir to the medical room. The medical room was filled with an even stronger smell of medicinal herbs. Marcus lay on a simple wooden bed against the wall, eyes closed, face pale, breathing weak. Myra was wiping his forehead. Seeing Lynx come in, she looked up, her eyes serious. How is he? Lynx asked urgently. Not good. Myra said softly. On the surface it looks like heat stroke, but when I checked, there is something strange in his body. I can't say what it is, but it is definitely not heat stroke. Lynx walked to the bedside and looked at Marcus. This man who called him out by the bonfire a few days ago was now as weak as a leaf. What special thing has he eaten recently? Myra shook her head, same as everyone else, but... She hesitated for a moment. Yesterday the kitchen sent him a special meal, saying it was Master Batiatus rewarding him for training hard, a small bowl of stewed meat, much better than usual. Special meal. Lynx's eyes turned cold. Did others have it? No, only he had it. Myra said. I felt strange at the time. Marcus's training performance wasn't the best. Why would he be rewarded alone? Thinking about it now. It's a test. Lynx interrupted her. To see the effect of the drugged food. Myra's face turned white. You mean? Someone wants to drug all of our food, but doesn't dare to put too much at once, afraid of being discovered, so they first find someone to test the dose and observe the reaction. Lynx looked at the unconscious Marcus. Marcus became the guinea pig. Amir sucked in a cold breath beside him. Then, what do we do now? Tell everyone. No. Lynx shook his head. No evidence. And Marcus is like this now. Dead men tell no tales. If we say it, we will only be treated as rumor mongers. But. No buts. Lynx turned to look at Myra. Can you save him? Myra bit her lip. I will try my best, but I need a few kinds of herbs. There are none in the training camp. I need to buy them in the city. I have money. Lynx took out the denarii Batiatus gave him from his bosom, took out 2 and handed them to Myra. Enough. Myra looked at the 2 silver coins, hesitated for a moment, and took one. Enough, one is enough, but, how do I get out? Slaves cannot leave the training camp casually. Lynx thought for a moment. Go find Lady Lucretia. Say Marcus's condition is serious and needs special herbs. Ask her to help arrange it. She should agree after all, a gladiator dying before the performance match is not good for Batiatus. Myra nodded. Good, I will go now. She packed up the medicine box and hurriedly left the medical room. Lynx asked Amir to guard the door. He sat down by the bedside himself and looked at Marcus's pale face. This man who had provoked him before was now lying here between life and death because he ate the reward he shouldn't have eaten. Ironic. System. Lynx asked in his heart, can you detect the toxin in his body? Detection requires close contact with the target. Continue. Continue. Detecting. Detected compound neuroinhibitor, dose, medium. Component is homologous with the toxin detected in the host's body, but the concentration is higher. Current effect, target's nervous system is damaged. Coma state will last 12 to 24 hours. If not treated in time, it may cause permanent damage. Homologous. It is indeed the same thing. Lynx clenched his fist. Batiatus is really watertight. Large-scale drugging uses micro-doses, testing uses medium doses. It can control the overall situation and test the effect. Ruthless enough. Just as he was thinking, footsteps came from outside the door. Amir pushed the door open and said nervously, Big brother, Crixus is here. Lynx frowned, stood up and walked to the door. Crixus was striding over. His face had no expression, but his eyes carried a trace of complexity. He walked to the medical room door, looked at Marcus inside, then looked at Lynx. How is he? Not good. Crixus was silent for a moment, then suddenly lowered his voice, I know what's going on. Lynx slightly raised an eyebrow. Crixus walked a few steps to the side and motioned for Lynx to follow. The two walked to a corner of the courtyard, ensuring no one was around. Yesterday afternoon. Crixus opened his mouth, his voice very low. I saw the kitchen steward secretly add something to Marcus's bowl of stewed meat, white powder, just a little bit. Lynx looked at him, you saw it, but didn't stop it? Why should I stop it? Crixus sneered. That kid Marcus was still putting his arm around your shoulder a few days ago. I wished he would die. Then why are you telling me now? Crixus's face changed. He gritted his teeth and said, because this morning, the kitchen also sent me a special meal. Lynx's eyes narrowed. I didn't eat it. Crixus gritted his teeth. I poured it to the dog. As a result, that dog collapsed in the afternoon and still can't stand up now. He paused and stared at Lynx, that old thing Batiatus wants to mess with me too. Lynx understood. Crixus may be stupid, but he is not stupid enough to let others slaughter him. After realizing that he had also become a target, he finally couldn't sit still. "So you came to find me?" "Yes." Crixus nodded. "In the performance match, we need to cooperate, but the premise of cooperation is that we both have to go on the field alive. What do you want to do?" "I don't know." Crixus irritably scratched his hair. "But I know that relying on just the two of us is not enough. At least 1/3 of the people in the training ground have eaten special meals recently. If we don't do something, on the day of the performance match, we may not even be able to hold the sword steadily." Lynx looked at him and suddenly asked, "How many people can you pull in?" Crixus was stunned. "What do you mean?" "It means that if we want to resist, we need manpower. How many people can you guarantee will stand on our side at the critical moment?" Crixus frowned and thought for a moment. 5 or 6, I guess. All the ones who follow me. Their brains are not good, but they listen to me. 5 or 6. Plus the 5 on Lynx's side, 11 people. Barely enough. But not enough. We need more. Lynx thought for a moment and said, "Before the performance match, we need to pull in at least 15 people to ensure that half the strength in the training ground is in our hands." "How to pull them in?" "Tell them the truth." "But not now. Wait until Marcus wakes up, let him say it himself, then find an opportunity to let everyone see the miserable state of that dog. With evidence in front of them, they will naturally choose a side." Crixus stared at Lynx for a few seconds and suddenly smiled. "You kid, smarter than I thought." "If I wasn't smart, I would have died long ago," Lynx said flatly. "Okay." Crixus nodded. "I will contact my people. You handle Marcus's side. When the time is right, we will act together." "Fine." Lynx extended his hand. "Temporary cooperation." Crixus hesitated for a moment, but still extended his hand and shook it with him. Temporary. Chapter 20. When Lynx returned to the medical room, Amir was still guarding the door. "Big brother," Crixus he. "Temporary ally. You continue to guard the door. Don't let idle people in. I'll go see how Myra is doing." He left the medical room, walked to near the main building, and found a hidden corner to wait. About half an hour later, Myra finally returned, carrying a small cloth bag in her hand, her expression hurried. Lynx stopped her. "How did it go?" Myra was startled. Seeing it was him, she breathed a sigh of relief. Lady Lucretia agreed. "She sent a slave to go with me to the pharmacy and bought the needed herbs. But..." She hesitated for a moment. "Madam asked me if you asked me to find her." "What did you say?" "I said yes." After hearing that, Madam's expression was a bit strange, but she didn't ask anything more. Lynx nodded. "You go save Marcus first. We'll talk about other things later." Myra looked at him, wanting to speak but stopping. In the end she nodded and quickly walked toward the medical room. Lynx looked at her back, calculating in his heart. On Lucretia's side, he needed to find a time to go over. This woman has too many thoughts and knows too much. He must stabilize her. In the evening, Myra finally came out of the medical room. Her face was tired but carried a trace of relief. "How is he?" "He woke up. The toxin has been cleared a bit, but his body is still very weak. I told him to continue lying down, not to make noise, and pretend he hasn't woken up yet." "Can he speak?" "Yes, but his voice is very small." "Enough. Take me to see him." In the medical room, Marcus had already woken up. He was leaning against the head of the bed, his face still pale. But his eyes had recovered clarity. Seeing Lynx come in, his lips moved. He wanted to say something, but couldn't make a sound. Lynx sat down by the bedside. "Don't speak. Listen to me." He lowered his voice. Do you know why you became like this? Marcus nodded. His eyes were full of anger. The bowl of stewed meat the kitchen gave you had a problem. Lynx continued. It's not just you. Many people in the training ground have unknowingly eaten the same thing. Batiatus wants to weaken us to ensure the performance match is spectacular. Marcus clenched his fists. Do you want revenge? Marcus nodded hard. Good. Lynx continued. Then you cooperate with me. Starting tomorrow, continue pretending to be unconscious or play dumb. When the time comes, I will let you stand out and tell everyone the truth. Marcus nodded again. A hoarse sound came from his throat. I listen to you. Lynx patted his shoulder and stood up to leave. At the door, he turned back and looked at Marcus. This man who had provoked him before now had flames of revenge burning in his eyes. Very good. Hatred is sometimes more powerful than loyalty. That night, Lynx went to the bathhouse. Lucretia was indeed waiting. She sat by the hot water pool, only draped in a thin gauze. Seeing Lynx come in, she looked up at him, her eyes complex. You finally came. Madam was looking for me. Lynx sat down opposite her. Marcus's matter, you asked Myra to find me. Lucretia stirred the water. Her tone unreadable. Yes. Why? Because he cannot die. The performance match is imminent. If a gladiator dies in the training camp, it will cause unnecessary trouble. Moreover, I need him alive to stand up and speak at the necessary time. Lucretia suddenly raised her head and stared at him. Stand up and say what? The truth. Lynx met her gaze. Say that Batiatus is drugging the food, wanting to weaken or even kill his own gladiators. Lucretia's face changed. Are you crazy? Do you know what you are saying? I am very sober. Madam, you also know, don't you? You know Batiatus's methods better than anyone. Lucretia was silent for a while, then suddenly smiled. There was bitterness in her smile. Yes, I know. I know so well that, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and feel like I am sleeping in a nest of vipers. She stood up, walked in front of Lynx, leaned over and looked at him. Lynx, do you know why I help you? Because I am useful. Not entirely. Lucretia shook her head. Because you are the only one who, in front of this viper, still wants to bite back. I have seen enough of him scheming against others, seen enough of those people either dying or becoming his dogs. I want to see how big a wound you, this wild dog, can bite. Lynx smiled. Then will Madam help me? Help you? Lucretia sneered. What can I help you with? I can't even save myself. You can give me information. Batiatus's plans, movements from the notice side, even, who is specifically operating the kitchen matter. Lucretia stared at him for a long time. Finally she sighed. The kitchen steward is Batiatus's distant relative, called Lucius. The drugging matter is handled by him, but the drug was personally given to him by Batiatus, stored in a small clay bottle, locked in the bottom drawer of the study. What drug? I don't know. Batiatus only said it was called calming powder. In small amounts it can make people relax. In large amounts, it will make people slowly lose strength, eventually even unable to hold a sword. Lynx remembered it. Also, Lucretia continued. The Nodes training camp has been secretly training a new formation these days. It's not the 4-person encirclement we talked about before, but 6 people. 6 people. Lynx frowned. Isn't the performance match 2 against 4? On the surface it is 2 against 4. Lucretia paused, then said, but in reality, Nodes will bribe the referees and guards. After the match starts, they will secretly let the other 2 enter the field. At that time, what you face will not be 4, but 6. Lynx's eyes turned cold. Is the information reliable? Reliable. Lucretia nodded. It was said by Nodi's boss's mistress. That woman has some friendship with me. She drank too much and accidentally let it slip. 6 people. Plus Crixus possibly tripping him up, and the accumulated toxin in the body. This performance match is really a dragon's pond and tiger's den. Thank you for telling me these things. Lynx said sincerely. Lucretia looked at him, suddenly reached out and gently stroked his face. Lynx, promise me one thing. What? If you win, if you really can bite that viper to death. She paused, her voice lowering. Take me away. Lynx was stunned. I know I am not worthy of you. Lucretia smiled bitterly. I am old and not clean, but I don't want to die here. I don't want to be thrown away by Batiatus as a discarded piece one day. Take me away. Anywhere is fine. Even if I become a laundry slave for you, it's fine. There were tears in her eyes. Lynx was silent for a while and nodded. Okay. If I win, I will take you away. Lucretia smiled. Tears fell and dripped into the hot water pool. Thank you. That night, Lynx didn't stay long in the bathhouse. He returned to his cell, lay on the bed, and all the information he got today in his mind. Kitchen steward Lucius. The calming powder in the study drawer. Nodi's a 6-person formation. Crixus's temporary cooperation. Marcus's awakening. And Lucretia's request. And Myra's clear eyes. He turned over and looked at the moonlight outside the window. The system panel floated in his consciousness. Task, establish prestige. Progress, 5/10. Remaining time. He needed to pull in 5 more people. Then gather enough points to exchange for toxin resistance. Then face the encirclement of 6 people. Then guard against Crixus's betrayal. Then, survive. Lynx closed his eyes. A sentence floated in his mind, one he had read in some book in his previous life. When you stare into the abyss also stares back at you. He was now standing at the edge of the abyss. Behind him was a viper, in front were hungry wolves. The only path to survival was to jump down and then kill a bloody path from the bottom of the abyss. Then come. He muttered to himself. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold arc. Moonlight spilled on his face, half bright, half shadow. Like his current situation. And like the path he was about to take. Performance match countdown, 2 days. And the storm had already taken shape in the darkness.